Before we begin this episode, I want to put in a quick word from our sponsor, me. We got the name for this podcast from the mission of Momentum Lab, our coaching program. We are both incubating the next generation of heroes and the next step in the evolution of consciousness. If you listen to the show, you're already a part of that process. Thank you. So if you haven't already, sign up for the newsletter to get insights, tools, and inspiration on living a purposeful, visionary, and impactful life. And if it ever dawns on you that that's easier to do with a community of excellence urging you on, that it can make the difference in you achieving your personal goals, check out Momentum Lab. Okay, back to the show. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the show. I'm Ankur Shah Delight, and this is 10,000 Heroes. Today's episode is with Katy Bowman. So many of you know Katy Bowman. She's an award-winning author and biomechanist. And she brings out a lot of controversial ideas like getting rid of all your furniture or not wearing shoes as healthier ways of interacting with the world around us. And we touch on some of those today, but really it's more about how Katy's mind works as she explores the world around her. We get a little bit into her origin story and what made her so passionate about learning movement fluency, but from a very rational perspective. So I'm really stoked about this. I've known Katy for years and have enjoyed every conversation I've had with her. She's incredibly thoughtful and thought-provoking and not afraid to push people into corners and have them really see what's going on. So welcome back to the show and enjoy. Before we start recording, you mentioned you've had a podcast for 7 years. You just crossed your 4 million
downloads. That's not 4 million people, though.
Yeah, so some of those people...
My mom downloaded it a
robots.
million times. Yeah, right.
And in the same sentence or the second sentence after that, you said that you don't see yourself as a content producer. So tell me a little bit about, unwind that a little bit.
Yeah, so you just pretty much hit the nail on the head of maybe the difference that I hold. The way that I would categorize content producing. So on one hand, are you familiar with this idea of like an influencer?
I was in Paris a couple of weeks ago, and I saw some people taking pictures of themselves in like a famous spot and making funny faces, or what to me looked like funny faces.
Right.
I think they're supposed to be attractive faces. And my friend was like, those people are trying to be influencers.
Right.
So I'm a little bit.
So it's this, to me, like an influencer is someone who is creating content, regular content, enough to attract a stream of eyes. I think of the commodity of our time as looks, views, where people are putting their attention. So if you can create a compelling stream of information, then that becomes your stream that people can't look away from, is something for someone else to rent out or pay for. And people drop products into that stream, or information into that stream, pay the influencer to be able to do that. So there's a lot of people trying to become influencers. So for me, content production always, the way that I use it is for the sake of creating content. Like it's you're creating it endlessly. Every day you wake up and you're like, I have to put something in the billboard space. Where for me, I don't think of myself as a content producer. I mean, yes, there is an output at the end of the day, but it's like, it's all something that I wanted to be said first, where the content, the delivery system is sort of secondary to the messaging. So like, that's how I hold them differently. So I am not someone who's like, I got to create a social media post every single day and I have to put podcasts out so that I keep ears going. I will not drop a podcast episode for months if I don't have anything to say. Like, I never wanted any of the avenues that I use to distribute my information be the vacuum that I was trying to fill. Like, I don't want the distribution. I don't want the tool to become like the master of me.
Yeah.
And so I really have an interesting relationship. I mean, I'm clearly using all the tools that are out there, but I want to be the one controlling them and not in the other way. So I guess, yeah.
So you have a mission that's apart from influence, eyeballs, attention,
And even just
money.
creation. Like I'm not even particularly someone who is thinking like I must even create something.
Yeah.
Where I have artistic friends like I must create every
Right,
day. And
right.
clearly I am assembling things and putting things together. Some of them are in my mind, some of them are on paper, some of them are on video. But yeah, like I don't feel the creative urge as much as to me it feels like the urge for the message.
Yeah. And so maybe this is a good moment to share what is the message, and maybe not necessarily the message that it could be what you're sharing right now through your channels and your books and all that. But what's the ultimate message that?
I think the ultimate message is there's a phenomenon as it relates to movement of everything, but certainly human movement, that is entirely overlooked right now, willfully overlooked. Our focus on overlooking it might even be embedded in our DNA somewhere. And for the amount of struggle that's going on in so many realms of human experience, becoming aware to this phenomenon, like most simply, I think it's a way of reducing suffering. So that message is like movement matters. Like that's all that it is. It's 2 words. Movement matters, and it's mattering to many different aspects. And it doesn't matter who hears the message. There's some way that it's going to relate to your individual life or your broader way of understanding society or politics or the environment. Like it matters to that. And why don't you just consider it?
Okay, so this is not like move in this way or lose weight or build strength or gain mobility. This is not that part of the movement conversation.
No, it has nothing to do with fitness. Well, I mean, it's related in some way because they're all movement. But no, it is about the understanding of the way movement affects basic biology and ecology. So yeah, it's not necessarily a health argument. Although for people who are struggling with their health, that could be why it's relevant to them. But no, and a large part of sort of where I started was our understanding of movement is so small, the entire context we give it is related to fitness.
Yeah, it's hard for us to imagine it having an impact outside of that.
No, that's right, because in a sedentary culture, which I am a member of, there's just simply not an awareness of it in the same way that other cultures just don't have concepts of certain things. We don't really have a broad concept of movement. And so I'm always just trying to pull it out and tease it out and show people. Like my first book that I wrote was like, exercise is a type of movement, but it is not movement. You can't even use those terms interchangeably. Exercise is something really specific. Here's why it should be broader, even relative to personal health. And then, of course, it got even larger than that, saying movement is even more than something that humans do, to be well. It relates to labor and, all these other things that we've talked about before. And we just don't see it. We're not fluent in movement. We're not fluent in the concept of movement yet. Because we're trying to get people to recognize that everything is nature, right? Everything that's built is coming out of nature. Yeah. But we don't really have categories for the difference between a beaver dam and a skyscraper. Yes, they are both things that are extracted from the earth and arranged, but they're clearly different in maybe their endurance, in their amount of disruption. But we don't really talk about things at that degree yet. But since language has become language is very malleable in the sense that we just sort of we keep changing words based on what the culture sort of agrees that they mean, make it very difficult to watch progress or track progress. When it's like, well, I watched TV when I was young. It's like the TV you watched was different, right? Even down to, well, it's on the screen now. So now, just to go back to that age of television, there's still TV now, but of course the number of channels is quite different. There's also all the technologies of freezing it where you want, right? And coming back to it, so that you never have to miss a thing. Like the amount of control we have over, not only do you have a TV, you can watch exactly what you want to watch whenever you want to watch it. So it's just a completely different situation as far as like what you're stuffing into your mind, I think. It's like the difference between just eating like a real basic, simple fare for food and then being at a buffet every single day with everything that possibly exists that you can pick. Like how do we become when we're in that particular environment? And now, just in the last few years, that buffet is in your hands. Or that, right? Yeah. Like, so now you don't even have to get up to move for that buffet. It just keeps getting closer and closer and more abundant. And then now the people who have access to it are younger, and all of that is affecting our physical, like our need to create physical forces within our own body. You know, like I'll use really simple analogies of like, you used to have to go out and get your essentials, right? You needed to eat and have good water and find a mate and build a shelter and, traverse here or there. And we still need all of those things, but the movements, you can do everything with a thumb now. You know what I mean? Yeah. Our mating's online. I mean, our mating's with a thumb, like you're literally swiping right or swiping left. And you can find a house online, just people buying houses, never even seen them. You're moving money around, like everything that used to take you walking into a building, or before, physical people moving structures from place to place have all been reduced. For some, there's plenty of people who are still having to do the labor involved in a lot of those things, but it's not sort of the dominant culture that has to do that. And there are ramifications to that. And that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in exploring everything from the personal ramification of you not moving for anything that you need, but then societally what shifts for everything when it is all handheld.
Well, let's go into that. So let's start with the personal, and then we'll go into the interpersonal. And maybe what do you see? I think the positives are often celebrated, like we kind of know what they are, but we should probably go over them. Mm-hmm. What do you see as what we gain?
Yeah.
Or what do we see as what we gain, and then what we lose?
Well, right, and I think that there's always some sort of gain. The gain is, the main gain that I'd be able to see is choice. I would think people would say there's an excess amount of time now that you free up when you don't have to do everything manually. I always talk about, I have this picture of my great-grandmother, and they were immigrants to the United States, farming people. And I have this picture of my grandmother, and I was like, to my great-grandmother, excuse me. And I thought she was like 65 or 70, and my mom was like, I know she's 30. There's a fatigue and hardness of life that comes in labor. Discomfort ages us in some ways, although interestingly enough, our lack of physical activity sort of accelerates our aging biological aging.
It's also hard on the body not to use it in a way.
And it's both. We are definitely in our comfort and leisure it's hard to say more, the physical ailments are probably different, right? But I think comfort, it's comfort. Comfort is comfortable. More time. Again, it's just generally, I just think of like more freedoms for more people. What do you think are some of the benefits?
I think the main benefit from a kind of a mainstream economics perspective is that people can be freed up to do higher value work.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's what I think is a freedom overall.
You can just work more.
Right. That's right.
You can contribute more to the GDP of whatever place you're in. That's the standard economist response, I think. So yeah, it's convenience and then added higher productivity due to more specialization.
Yeah.
Because I don't have to be shopping myself. Some AI bot can find the right USB cable for me, then I have more time to actually be working on my programming or whatever it is.
Things that we want to be doing.
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting question. Because it's like, well, how many people are doing things that they want to be doing for their highly paid work?
That's right. And that is always the question. I mean, I think there's probably people who are like, I would much rather be doing, maybe I don't want to be doing this per se, but I would much rather be doing this than something else that was super labor intensive. But at the same time, when people go out and, get to work in a community garden or do something physical with their body, with that contrast, they're like, man, this feels so much better than going to work. So I do think it has a lot to do with choice. I mean, I, as someone who spends a lot of time advocating for lower tech versions of things, lower automated versions, the idea of walking versus driving, I grew up in a community of people for whom walking was the only option of transportation. And, there's a lot of privilege in saying you should walk instead of drive when there's a whole other group that's only been able to walk and has to walk a ton. And so I've been really trying to explore, like, what are the differences between, me walking to school, let's say, alongside migrant farm workers who are walking to work, and choice seems to be the difference. Like, the physical activity is the same. The physical benefit to the activity is the same, but choice goes a long way. And choice might actually go a long way in the way our minds or our brains, make us healthy or not. So, like, there is all of that at play too. So I can see that technological advances have given many people more choice. I don't know if it's necessarily made people physically better or even physically happier, but they do have perhaps more autonomy. Some people have more autonomy in choosing if they would like to do that or not. But I don't also think that many people are making a choice. They have a choice, they're making a choice, but they don't really recognize that they're making a choice. It's almost like a reflexive behavior.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny thing. So I've been doing this coaching thing for the last couple of years, and I notice almost irrespective, almost uncorrelated to people's level of wealth, there's a feeling that I have to work and pay these bills, otherwise I'll be in financial insecurity. And that's the opposite of autonomy, right? This like fear of I'm not going to be able to feed myself or my family unless I do what I'm doing, regardless of whether I like it. And I think if you feel that way, it's harder to like what you're doing and gain joy out of it. And there's this dialectic that we've set up between something I enjoy doing with my time and something that pays me enough that I can do it and not have this stress or this fear, this financial security. I think a lot of people people I work with are caught between those two and having to make one choice or another. And neither is satisfying. It's like, oh, okay, I'm going to work on this farm and live in financial security and not be able to like do what society wants me to do in order to have it made. But at least I'm enjoying myself. Or the opposite choice, like I'm going to work at Netflix or whatever, but I'm not going to feel like I could ever have autonomy with my time.
Right. It's not very clear. It's really where I have gotten myself to on a lot of different avenues of thought is just, it's a trade-off. Like, you're just trading off different things. I think also for me, it's who I'm probably speaking to has a lot to do with that idea of recognizing that you have a choice, because I have found that a lot of people feel victim to where they are in the world that they're in right now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is sort of this thing is happening to me wherever I am. And it is, and also you probably have more choice than you realize in the physical realm, right? So, and of course, I think people probably do this psychologically too. It's like, well, you have more choice over your response to the situation. And that's a huge tool for people to learn. It's like, wow, I just thought that X happened and Y was the feelings. And, arms up in the air, like, what can I do about it? It's like, oh, well, you actually have a choice to how you respond to X. It doesn't mean that you always opt for the best response for you, but knowing that you have a choice is sort of a balm of a lack of autonomy. Yeah. You might not, like, I can definitely be in situations and respond a certain way, but like, well, I can own that my response was mine. Mm-hmm. And even if I don't like the outcome, there's a balm in knowing it's like, well, then it's also on me.
Yeah.
I just feel like I'm not trying to avoid feeling terrible, but I don't like the feeling of not being in control of myself so much. So the work that I do about physical movement has a lot to do with, we all get different lots in physical life. But in the same way that you have some control over your psychological response or your thought response, your mindful responses, you have a lot more response over what you're doing with your body than you realize. Like, we're not fluent in even our own bodies. Like, we think that the way we walk is the way we walk, and the way that we sit, that these things are somehow programmed in our DNA versus just learned very early on. We have old habits, but we don't really have. We're much more malleable in our physical bodies than we realize. And so for many people who are like, I have been victim to this physical thing for a long time, then I could be like, well, did you know, like, you can actually change this? Like, here, try this. Or don't put the same thing on your feet that you always put on. Or, hey, this other, way that you've been positioning your body because of the way you designed your house and the furniture that you put in your house, like, those are all choices that you didn't even know they're cultural sort of inheritances, but they're malleable. Again, you have to maybe be on the fringe a little bit, but if the whole world isn't feeling that great, then being on the fringe as far as how you're physically feeling is a great choice, or at least it's a choice. And so it's just coming at it from that side of things, of going, you might not choose what's optimal, but at least you have a choice, and that makes people feel better, makes me feel better.
Oh yeah, it's a real gift. I mean, for me, that was the gift of meditation.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Learning about, it's not inevitable that I have sensation and then the reaction that comes.
That's right.
There's a couple of things you said that make me want to ask you a little bit about your past. Mm-hmm. One is, generally, I found, and something I'm really interested in, is when people are passionate about something, it's usually because they had a moment of insight. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to hear about that. And also this, you mentioned that you grew up in a community that walking was kind of the option. I'd love to hear what kind of community that was or how that was.
Well, I do think a lot of what I do is still probably formulated by, the environment of my origin, right? It's still my origin story. So I grew up in a very sedentary household. And I do think that the pursuits that we do later in life, professionally or just maybe even what we pursue for fun, is maybe it's like a deficit. For me, I think it was trying to understand the nature of sedentarism. Like I grew up in such a sedentary, unhappy place. And my childhood wasn't unhappy, and I wasn't unhappy, but I could recognize an association between unmoving unhappiness.
So like your parents or the people you're surrounded with were just kind of sitting?
Yes, well,
literally sedentary? No.
Literally sedentary. One of my parents was not, but that parent wasn't around. That parent was very active. But though the household that I was in had multiple generations of just very literally sedentary people, but the sedentarism wasn't only of the body. It was of the mindset. It was of psychologically unflexible, physically unflexible, psychologically
Yeah, this is the exact
inflexible.
opposite of everything I know about you.
Well, that's right? So maybe I'm protesting a little bit too much. So yes, it is. But I think just trying to, and I felt the effects of that on my own body, and probably on some, I would say, more cellular level. I was like, listen, right? This isn't right. Like, and just knowing it, and maybe it wasn't right for me, but it grew on to something. It's like, I don't think it's really right for anybody. Like, even the body that chose to be physically and psychologically inflexible, like, it wasn't a great choice for that body either. And then maybe it was, sort of like what would a toolbox look like to help someone out of that space? And I am very active now, and I have a whole, journey out of that started in my later teens. But I think that I was able to come, like, when you grow up without, like, I'm trying to think of, it'd be like not being able to read. It would be like, like if you grow up in a house where you didn't learn how to read, reading later on is a lot more challenging.
Yeah.
So I was like not fluent in movement literacy. So the toolbox that worked for me was not the same toolbox that worked for young children, all, primed and ready to go, just given the right environment, and that flourishes on its own, right? I was a late bloomer movement-wise.
Yeah.
And so I needed a different toolbox, and my toolbox was reason. Rational. Like, I needed movement to be rationalized because I already embodied not moving, and I'm here, I'm a human, having a human experience. So I don't think movement is tied up with our humanity or our consciousness, but I do think movement is tied up to the relationship that we're in with our body, right? Like, I think this is being in 3 relationships, and one of those is with our physical body, which is different than our relationship with ourselves. That's not our physical body.
Sure.
And then the third one is your relationships with other people or others. All others. And so that's the toolbox that I'm making is really for those who are like, wow, I didn't have movement fluency. And how do you know that when, while this is a very literate culture, it's a very sedentary culture. So our systems support sedentarism and reinforce it and propagate it, right? Like, that's how biological cultures work. You get similar cells sort of popping up. The environment is supporting it. And there's a big decline in human movement, right? So it's even trending. We're trending towards sedentarism with a huge boost, an exponential boost in the last few years that's lingering. And you could talk about the benefits of it. It's like, well, people still got connectivity with other people, and there was many problems that were trying to be solved as that system went into place, but it still comes with its side effects nonetheless, usually the unintended consequence gain.
Yeah, okay, so there's a couple of elements there. And maybe one I want to highlight. I saw this movie on the plane recently called King Richard.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that?
I haven't seen it, no.
You know what it's about?
I'm going to assume King Arthur.
No.
Okay, so no, I have no idea.
It's about the family, the parents of Venus and Serena Williams,
Oh.
the tennis stars.
Oh, tell me more.
And this guy, I mean, it's crazy. The whole thing it's just crazy. I mean, it's crying. But he has this flash of insight at some moment of like, I know how to raise tennis stars. He and his wife are both athletes.
So Richard's the father.
The father, yeah. And then he goes and tells his wife, he's like, hey, we should have these two more kids.
Yeah.
And we're going to make them into these amazing tennis stars. And he has this plan he keeps talking about. This is all in the movie. I don't know what's...
Yeah.
I'm assuming at least half of it's true.
Right.
And it's like 75-page plan about how he's going to do it. And then he does it. And they do it. And they all do it as a family. And we know the results.
Right.
But he was able to do, or their family was able to do what they did because of the experience that these parents had. And you have this kind of opposite experience, like not growing up as an athlete you grew up as someone who didn't have movement. And so the toolkit, the plan that you can build is perfect and necessary and helpful for the people who also didn't have this experience or this vocabulary with how to be in their bodies in a certain way. Mm-hmm. So you're perfectly architected.
Right.
For that.
The only plan I can write is how someone in a sedentary culture becomes a mover.
Yeah.
Although I do think through my training, because I went to even university for this, right? Like that's how much I'm just so interested in it that I think that I could probably even write it now, how to make a professional tennis person. But it's through that original, I don't even know if it was like a mental, I do remember having insights of going like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better, but just through my experience of.
And that happened in high school? That transition?
Mm-hmm. I think it's not really like a sudden shift. It was just picking up little threads along the way. Like doing a little sport here, stepping out of my comfort zone a little bit here, and then trying it over here. But I wasn't even really aware of the language. It was really more just following what made my body feel better. I think how much time I spend now with my own kids, informing them of your body has needs and your body is communicating with you about those needs. I'm going to teach you how to be body literate. Or you already know how to be body literate. I'm going to help you maybe interpret some of those signals the signals are primitive. Like our bodies have very primitive signals, and we live in something that's equivalent to an arcade. So if you take
I'm not familiar with this metaphor, so I'm loving this.
Really?
I'd love for you to go a little more into it.
Well, so our hardware and software is quite primitive. The evolution of the environment has been so extremely rapid. It's not that different than putting, a gorilla in an arcade. It's extremely stimulating and loud and fast. And the reflexes that we have are primitive, and they don't relate to this environment at all. They relate to, everything that's outside, and not necessarily benign, but if you're meant to startle at a loud noise and you immediately get born into a place of loud noises, startling is the perfectly normal reflex for that. So as people who've dwelled in the arcade a little bit longer, you're sort of going, well, now let me show you the more refinement. This startling is something that you should respond to. But this one over here, that's fine.
Yeah, this incredibly loud blender is totally normal.
That's fine. Oh my gosh, this makes me just tell. I just remember I took my son when he was like probably 2 or 3 to a children's museum, and they had a fake kitchen. And he like put all the fake fruit into the blender and just put the lid on, and he just goes, "Nah!" And he just started screaming, and the whole thing. And I just thought, wow, this is his impression of blender. Like I didn't even know it was a loud noise, but he screamed really loud for like 30 seconds.
This is what it means to be me next to your blender.
That's right. And I was like, oh, okay, point taken. Right. And my dog lets me know, though. As soon as a dog sees a blender come out, gone. Because that dog doesn't have a broker of signals, right? And as parents who are sort of, it's like being a guide. I'm going to guide you here. And I was not guided with someone who had an experience. They weren't an experienced guide, because they hadn't been guided. It's just all like, this is fine, normal, what? Kids are resilient. Kids are resilient is sort of like the tagline from parenting in the 70s. Like my other friends have talked about, and I'm like, I don't know if that's a parenting plan, but it might have been the title of the book that everyone read during those years. Kids are resilient, they'll be fine. Just constantly working on dealing with the fact that we're in the arcade, and the signals are trying to keep us completely out of there, but we live in here, and so we're trying to negotiate it, and then sometimes like pulling the plug on some of the games. Like, we got to take this noise down. And as parents, we often do that, right? Like, don't put infants in super loud places. Like, we understand that it's too loud, but you callous up after a while and you can deal with it. Maybe. I think that some people can deal with it better than others, and those who can't, a lot of those things we end up labeling as problems because it's relative. It's like the people who can deal in the culture, sort of in the same way of evolution, are going to making it through, and those who don't fall off. So there's, or aren't as successful. It's an easier way to say it. Don't find it's easy to be successful in the arcade. But, if the arcade is growing, people who are successful in the arcade also grow with it.
Yeah. So some of these basic, like really simple, this primitive hardware, some of these responses, it's like being freaked out. Is that one of the responses that we're built with?
Yeah, I think responding to sudden noises or even people moving quickly, like those can definitely cause you to quickly try to hone in on what's moving faster, loudly, to get away, or just buy some time to see what's going on.
Anger? Is that?
I don't know. I don't know about the emotional ones.
Yeah, you're thinking more like physically.
Yeah, like that's my way of looking at physical things. Also, one of the big ones is like the paradox of the human body is the human body needs a lot of movement. In our DNA is sort of embedded this need to move our parts to keep them being able to move. At the same time, embedded in there is the tendency to take every opportunity to not move, to conserve energy.
Yeah, that to me seems very, like, I took a class on tracking once.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, you think of animals moving, but really they're just moving because you freak them out.
Oh, that's right.
And most of the time, they're totally just chill.
That's right. You need to, everything's trying to conserve energy. Like that's one of the laws we're dealing with. So our body has both those things going on, right? We have like dopamine, like we have regulators to get you moving. Like there's rewards for getting moving in addition to like, oh, you got food today, you got to safety. We have this primitive relationship between the movement and the reward system for moving. But in the arcade, I forgot to say the arcade's full of chairs. So yeah, it's like all the games. They're all of those games now that you sit down. Like you're not even standing up to play Pac-Man anymore. Like you're in a seat. There's a cushion there. So we don't really the condition of a human body being this still. Why would this ever happen? How did we even get here? Like our bodies are just not set up for an environment in which not moving is not only an option, it's the most common option. Like, what madman would have created that scenario? And so we don't come with, like, now we have to use this thing called willpower. Like, you have to use, or rational thought, right? That's my avenue. Because shame is another one. And I don't really do shame. So, like, to shame yourself into moving, is different than like rationally saying like these parts need these movement. I need to feed them. And so I will do that. So that's been my avenue of pursuit and why I tend to stay out of like fitness or like weight management as a way that you would move. It's just like any other piece of equipment that you have that you so lovingly clean or take care of. Like you'll put the cover on the microphone when you're done and clear the dust out of your computer, and people will oil their tools and they'll make sure that their gardening stuff gets out of the rain. But we have no sense that our body needs the same thing or what to do about it, even though all those other tools are only functional when we are physically, and so it's just that of just saying, you understand the principles of everything that I'm talking about. You just haven't applied them to yourself as much because we do have sort of we feel that everything's determined for us physically. Because I think with the discovery of DNA, of just going, oh no, all those outcomes they're in your, like, there's nothing you can do about those. Instead of saying, well, that's true, and there's a range to every one of those. Like, I think just with the new science of genetics or genomes, it's like, oh no, this is in your DNA. Your outcomes are in your DNA. That's why I wrote Move Your DNA, because it's like, it's like a viewfinder. Like every one of those genes is like a viewfinder. Like you can put it in here, but they toggle for slightly different pictures. And movement is a huge toggle. And it's one that we're not really aware of. And we tend to inherit, too strong of a word. Well, we tend to inherit habits equally to inheriting our DNA. And so for someone who inherited sedentary habits, I wanted to separate out, like, what are my genes here and what are the habits? And can I play around with different habits? And yeah, and that's where I am today.
Wow. I just had this vision. You talked about inheriting habits. So I grew up here in Sequim, traveled for many years, came back. And there's this Costco here.
Yes.
Store. And I remember going as a kid. I think there wasn't one here. It was in Silverdale at that time. With my stepdad. And his posture of pushing the cart, it was like all of his weight. I think he was like kind of folded his arms on the cart.
Right.
And all of his weight was on the cart. And his back was like, you see, he just had this way of like kind of giving the cart all of his weight.
Right.
And he was a much bigger person than I am. Maybe it kind of made sense. It seems like he developed that, like it worked for him.
Yeah.
But when I go to that same store, I do that with the cart, but it does not work for my body.
No.
It's like, it does not make any sense. And I do that every single time I go there. I do that, and then 2 seconds later, I'm like, oh, this is not.
Why am I doing this?
You know,
Right,
I've
right,
never
right.
done this in any other context, but just that.
Do you think it was seeing him do it and be like, oh, this is how carts work in Costco?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You never told me.
No, that's
Honest.
right. Well, I mean, like all animals, like we definitely learn through, I should say all mammals, like modeling is big. It's really big. But in a illiterate society, we've really focused more on like the verbal or the written exchange.
Right.
And like, I'm teaching you now. And because I didn't say I'm teaching you, I'm not teaching you. It's like, no, anything that you're doing is on the table for, right, okay, great. This is how adults talk to each other. This is how they take their free time. And like all that goes in. And modeling might even be weighted more heavily than the times when we're, explicitly trying to teach or inform.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Because there's this, what's the word? I think we have a built-in cognitive barrier. Maybe it's a bullshit detector. When someone is explicitly trying to teach us something, there's a part of us that's like, maybe that's true.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not true.
Right.
And I think this is kind of part of why advertising works so well, is it's just, it gets beyond that. Right? It's just modeling. It's just like showing you something.
Right.
Repeatedly,
Right.
Thousands of times, the person like opening the Coke or whatever.
Yeah.
So you just make those associations. So when we teach our kids that way, which we're doing at every single moment, yeah, I think it goes in deep.
Yeah, you're just doing it all the time. And, I just remember there was a saying too, like, do as I say, not as I do. And I was like, that just came out of your mouth. I'm 6, and that's an asimine thing to say.
Wait, unironically?
Unironically, like as a parent, like I think that's just like I just feel like, I feel like that was something that I heard my mom say, and do as I say, not as I do, and sort of sheepishly, right? But again, like there it was out loud, and I just was like, maybe even the fact that it was said was better than it not being said. But yeah, like that's why I just always try to, I don't want to make any difference between how I am on the inside and what I think is right and what my behaviors are. Just always try to keep them well aligned. I guess I should say. And then as long as I can do that, then I have like very few regrets.
Yeah. So let's say in the domain of movement, we're going to give our audience a little gift here.
Okay.
What are, maybe say 5, it's just a random number, it could be 3, it could be 10, patterns of movement that if we model them would really just be so beneficial to the people who surrounded us, as opposed to like the shopping cart movement.
Right, that's right. Well, so walking was, I can talk about just like when I'm thinking, you said King Richard, I definitely had some of that same mindset when I had my own kids, you know, is like, we need to raise movement literate people. Like, I think that every parent probably has a mission statement, whether they know it or not. Like, we all just I mean, for a lot of people, it's like, these kids need to go to college, you know, like that's, or whatever it is, like, and you're just making all of your choices around this vision that you had. And for our family, I wanted to raise someone who was equally fluent in movement as they were in reading, you know. So walking was a big one, and not just like hiking in what's considered leisure. So like in movement intersections, there's what we call a sloth model. So it means that all humans are going to spend their time in SLOTH, sleeping, leisure, occupation, transportation, or home.
Okay, this is not a derogatory term. This is descriptive of
Well, I mean, I'm sure whoever found those out, they're like, we're going to call this sloth. Because globally, sedentarism is a huge, expensive problem that every country is trying to solve. It was considered a pandemic before this pandemic. They were like, we have this pandemic of sedentarism that's encroaching on the globe as Western behavior encroaches, and it's very expensive. The quality of life, and then it's like people aren't even becoming more joyful with all their extra freedom of pursuing higher things. They're just.
This is really heartwarming for me. Like the mainstream bureaucrats care about this.
They do.
I didn't think that would be on their radar.
It is. And so like that's one of the things I do like to say. It's like the bureaucrats, the medicine, public health understands this is a huge issue, has spent millions, if not billions of dollars on research and programs. People aren't taking them up. It's not a lack of funding or care or science or even infographics that are made and translated and distributed. I mean, people can just even, you know, we've all gone to, like, maybe you've gone to your doctor or, you know, read something that says you should or shouldn't do something, and you're like, okay, I get that. And it's also really hard to not make the change, you know, to do the change. So because movement, again, we're so physically hardwired for stillness, right alongside our hardwiring for tremendous amount of movement, I think it's going to take something more than just the messaging. I think the environment needs to be altered. Like the environment that we're in, the physical shapes of where we're spending our spaces are not facilitating movement. They're facilitating sedentarism. So it's infrastructure time.
Yeah, change the environment.
We need to change the infrastructure.
Lower the friction, make it easier to.
That's right. You're trying to, we have to deal with inertia. You know, inertia is the issue. But the good thing about inertia, the flip side of inertia that we never use it for is like, once it's rolling, it's rolling.
Objects in motion stay in motion.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Once it's rolling, it's rolling. So definitely, and then movement is countercultural, I like to say. So you are sort of, you know, we're the weirdos who don't have a couch, you know, and that was weird at first. And then all of a sudden other people in our community also don't have a couch. And now there's more hanging bars in people's houses. And then kids are more freely used to like running around. And it's okay to wear pajama pants to school because look, they're not stiff and you can move around in them. And so we need a collective to be able to do it. Because again, that's what culture is. And being outside of culture is risky. You know, like you're more at risk when you don't have a culture at your back. And that's one of the reasons we don't, I think, choose to go against the grain as much, is because it's a vulnerable place to be. You know, you're at the margins. You're not marginalized per se, but you're at the margins of the collective of everyone else. And so you just have to, it's lonely, but it's great when you get more people on board. And I'm sorry, what were we talking about before I went off on that?
Some just like concrete, practical 5 things that we could do.
Yeah, so
and maybe they're in the environment.
Well, walking was one of them. Walking for transportation, like teaching my kids early on. Oh no, we walked to go do this thing. So I got to there from sloth. So a lot of the way we pursue movement and teach our children to pursue movement is through the leisure category.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're right. And so it sort of reinforces that
this is like an optional thing.
It is. And then then it becomes for people who have leisure time.
Yeah, it's a luxury.
It becomes a luxury. And as things get more challenging economically for more people, so a big reason a lot of people aren't taking it up is like, it's totally not relevant to my life. I'm struggling to meet basic needs here. Yeah. Right. And so I wanted to introduce the concept of the labor categories of movement. And we could all do that for ourselves, right? That's growing a little bit of your food, walking to the grocery store, just move for something that you need. That would be a concrete way to start shifting your physical and psychological relationship with the construct of movement. Yeah. Ground sitting, right? Or even that you have an option to taking a chair as a seat. Maybe you're standing for a meeting, at the back, or maybe, when you're working, if you are flexible enough in your arrangement for working, that you can sit on the ground and use different shapes with your body. So again, it's a physical change, but it's also just not automatically dropping into that chair as everyone around you has always done it. So the reason you lean on the cart is the same reason that we just keep putting our butts in chairs over and over and over again. We were handed that down as what you do. Other people are handed down as what to do. But if you travel around the world, you'll see that's not a thing for the world. That's a thing for here. We're not, I would say, we're not the norm. We're the norm in our own experience, but it's not a human norm. I'm big on footwear. I'm big on casts. Like where are you casting yourself? And by cast, I mean, if you've ever broken an arm and have had to put your body in something firm that holds its shape. Yeah. The body part adapts to that shape. So a chair, even though it's not a cast that's wrapped around, simply through your frequency of using it, has the same effect as being in a cast. Or shoes are another one. Like really, again, there's sort of these like odd cultural things that we do that when it makes up it's so close to our face, we can't really what else are you supposed to put on your feet?
Yeah, dude, it's crazy. I just bought running shoes for the first time since college, and there's this option. There's shoes that have what's called a wide toe box. Yeah. And I was like, wow, every shoe I've ever seen
has been smaller than your foot.
Has had a narrow toe box.
That's right.
But
we don't call those narrow toe box shoes. We call the other ones wide toe box shoes.
But it's just like, why would you do that to your foot?
So now every shoe though that you've put on has had a narrow toe box. Like I've written 2 books on this.
Oh, really?
Yes. And it's like because it's like we name things like there are like people will say I have to get my workout clothes. I'm like, then all of your other clothes are sedentary clothes. But we don't call that because movement is the atypical situation we find ourselves.
Like you said.
It's at the margin. And so we just have everything's named in the way that we see it. So there are clothes. Sedentary clothes are just clothes. And then when you have to move, you have to put on your movement clothes. Mm-hmm. And then shoes have to be smaller than your foot. And then now you can also buy a toe box that's wide enough for your foot. Right? Just kind of a weird
innovation.
Exactly. Are we going forward or backward? I'm not sure.
Okay, so we have the cast idea, which I think is really helpful.
It is, yeah.
The sitting on the ground. Yeah. Or just like alternative chair. This is related to the cast idea.
Yeah.
And then what was the first thing you said?
Walking. This idea of
walking. Connecting with labor.
Walking, yes. Walking I would even put in a separate category. Like, because there's taking a walk, which I think is a really good thing to get used to, because again, the narrow, our SAT version of like the narrow toe box is to the couch, is to the car, right? The default is that you go somewhere via your car versus you go somewhere human powered, right? Even though if we had if you imagine the USDA food pyramid with its base, walking would be the base for humans. Yeah. And it's what we get the least. But it's what our body shape is. It's the thing that's most informed our body shape. Yeah. And we don't really even do it anymore. So like trying to get people to like get your walking nutrients up a little bit. And then you could do the some sort of labor movement. Doesn't have to be walking, like I said, it could be any sort of you physically exchanging your muscle contractions for the thing that you need, which is very much the earlier traditional economic model.
Yeah.
And, and at that time, though, humans are generalists. Like, that's part of what makes us humans, as opposed to other animals that specialize. And it's because we're so general that we've been able to persist this long. But it's only been recently where most people have not held the exact same set of information. When you're in a generalist population, and we'll just go, and it's even people on the planet right now, like you can go to like the Hadza hunter-gatherer tribes, that still subsist and still live. Certainly not a culture that looks like it did, hundreds or thousands of years ago, but much different than what our daily experience is. And every person in that community knows the same things, which is a lot, but there's not a lot of specialized information. Now, everyone has become really specialized to their information, and almost nobody knows the essential generalized stuff. Mm-hmm. Like where food comes from, how to get it, how to make it, sanitation, even the things that we depend on, sanitation, waste management. Like, no one even knows the nuts and bolts anymore that we need to survive. So we've become more fragile in this way as a species. We're definitely moving, like, for all the technological advances, we're much more fragile. And have you ever read the Wizard and the Prophet?
No.
There's wizardry because as we create problems, humans are so good at tinkering. The solution is always just another wizardry.
Yeah.
And then we'll just be able to wizard ourselves out of whatever. And then the prophets are more like, well, we know that this God is here this long. They're always trying to go back and slow down wizardry. And their way forward is a mishmash of both, but not, the book's probably one of the least biased things I've ever read, where it's just really equally representing the benefits and the trade-offs of both. So I was thinking about that, of how do we, there is no going back, that doesn't exist. There's only going forward, but there's going forward thoughtfully. And then also I'm really big on checking my work, going, okay, if there's a misstep, an engineer is going to figure out where it was, right? You're not going to just keep lowering your acceptance rate for a failure, which sometimes we do. It's like you need to figure out if the thing that you designed didn't perform as designed, you need to figure out the problem, not just say, well, it got us good enough and then go forward. You need to go back and reassess because that design wasn't good. And then you redesign and go forward from there. So I'm big on that as a process for humanity. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, it takes too much time. We're too fast. We're moving fast now.
Well, and there's also a self-esteem component to that look at our mistakes without judging ourselves.
Yeah.
Or being like, oh, I'm a bad person because of it.
Yeah.
I think it's very, at least for me, it's not natural. There's this conflation of the two. That if I admit that I fucked this thing up, then I'm just bad.
Right.
Where they're really this prototypical engineer, he's not she's not gonna criticize herself for it. She's like, oh, I did this thing.
Yeah.
These parts of it worked, these parts of it didn't.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try and fix it. And there's not a lot of guilt or shame or kind of self-flagellation about it.
Yeah. And I do think that is maybe where that stereotype of people who do engineering work are more devoid of emotion, and people who are into emotions do something else. I'm not sure if there's anything to that, but I do think that when you are so personally attached to the thing, where to notice a flaw or to admit that there was a problem, is you're unable to do that because of how it makes you feel.
Right.
I'm not sure you should be designing things.
Right. Yeah.
Right. It's just sort of that, or maybe collectively just working on what is this thing called shame that everyone is that's now affecting the bridges that we're building.
Yeah.
You know, how do we, and you know, for me, that's the benefit of meditation as well, and why I was so attracted to, like, I think that individual work on self is so important for building the societies that we want to see built. Because for just this reason, it's like, if you haven't done that level of work on yourself and you're building vessels for other people to get into, and you're trying to hide the shadow side of the vessels that you're asking everyone to get into, like, that's scary.
Oh, yeah.
It's scary.
Yeah. And for me, that's the whole, really, we talked about the podcast earlier, that's the whole point of it, is how do we improve what we're doing as a society?
Together.
It's got to come from people really like self-reflecting and trying. Because otherwise, I mean, what we have is just a bunch of incredibly powerful people with all these technological tools, but without a really great sense of how do my actions affect myself and other people, right? That's where we are.
And where do we want to go? I mean, I just think of, I do like early philosophy and this idea of the collective going, you know, what are we pursuing here? You know, when the communities were smaller, there was maybe a discussion over, like, what are we pursuing? Are we pursuing the best life? Or the most noble life? Or what? And I don't see a ton of talk about the type of society that we're pursuing. We're all working really hard, and we might have definitions for our household, or, you know, if we're involved in smaller institutions, of what those directives are. But I don't think that there's societal ones anymore. And our society is becoming more global, right? We're all enmeshed in the choices that some people are making. So if you are not choosing, you are choosing. You just you weren't aware of what you're choosing. So I would like to see more societal mission statements. And I guess that's what politics are about. But I don't see that language being used as much. You know, I think if the language was more simple and people could state, like, the world that I'm imagining looks like this specifically, but I imagine this would be a problem, and here's how I'm thinking about it. I see people voting, you know, for general things, but I just don't hear enough discussion. Like, I would like more discussion amongst a broader range of different thinking people. Like, I want to hear different opinions. I don't want to hear everyone's opinion that's the same as mine. And I want to be like, I want to feel comfortable enough to be like, wow, why do you think that? Mm-hmm. And not have it be threatening, you know, and have someone explain it to me. And a friend of mine started this thing called democratic exercise in Canada, where you meet at a coffee shop and you get paired with someone who thinks differently than you. Actually, I don't know if you automatically get paired with someone who thinks differently than you, but on the coffee cups that you guys have are 5 difficult questions that tend to be polarizing, and you go for a walk and you're just sorting it out. And everyone who showed up has like, I'm here to do this exercise. So I'm not being sidelined, you know, at a family holiday, you know, of someone who wants to have this conversation. 2 people have decided, no, I'm interested in a society that talks like this. And then it's like a 45-minute walk, and you get to have a conversation with someone who probably thinks a little bit differently on things.
And is the mission just to listen and learn, or are you supposed to respond?
Both. Like, I think you have a discussion. Listen and learn, ask questions. You're not trying to convince anyone either way. It's more like, I want to know why you think that. And I have some questions that come up. And how would you answer these? And I don't know. I think we just need more of that. I would like to do more of that.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I've been saying that for years.
We're doing it right now.
Yeah.
I mean, podcasting is maybe a way of doing that, but getting with people who think radically different is always, like, I love that, because it's like, whoa, like, I didn't even know that was an option to think that. Where did you come from? But that was the feelings that bubble up when you hear someone who has such a different opinion. And sort of like we were talking before the podcast, you can respond to that feeling that you have when someone voices something different in 2 different ways. One, it's like with the curiosity of like, I need to get to know you because you think so differently than me, and I know that we are more similar than different. Like, I want to get into that. Or it's just like, I'm just turning this off. I can't stand, or it's easy when it's a show. It's harder when it's another person, like pushing them out or pushing them away. And
yeah, well, what's funny about it, when we talked about that earlier, you were describing your experience of being interviewed, and the people would interview you would come with that second perspective of wanting to turn you off or reject what you're saying, just triggering them. But there was no option to do that because they weren't interviewing you.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's maybe there's three types. Like, there's a person who's curious, and then there's a person who is triggered but curious about their own triggering, and that would be the interview.
Okay.
And then there's a person who shuts you off.
Okay.
So there's that, and there's probably some things in between. But I have learned now, as we talk about those primitive signals of body communication, that me being triggered by something is an invitation for knowing myself better. It is an indication in me, in the same way that they say, like, if someone's really irritating you, it's maybe like a mirror sort of thing. Like, I don't think it's a mirror necessarily as much as for me, it's like, I don't understand. And now that I don't understand something, instead of getting stressed about it, it's more like, oh, I have a question to ask, or I want to know a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay. So here, what you just said is, it's unarguably true for me. When we get triggered, it's always an invitation for curiosity as to our own experience. What can I learn from this moment? Easy for me to say that.
Sure.
What's your success rate on actually doing it when you're triggered? Like, are you able to have that awareness and go into it, or do you still have the fuck you response a lot of the time?
Oh yeah, there's probably I think I can see the emotions go by really fast. My dad was an air traffic controller, and I have all these weird asides because I explain things in situations that don't relate to that. So when my dad was given the adrenaline stress test, it was no, for his heart, there was no reaction. He was really able for his job, or either his job trained him this, or this is why he was good at his job, to not react to the adrenaline that came up. He could just metabolize adrenaline. And I have found that I'm really good at metabolizing adrenaline as well. And I don't know if it's through practice or if I've always been that way. I definitely have all the, people will be like, you're just a robot or whatever. And I'm like, I have all the emotions, but they don't push me around. I'm not again, my physical body is not necessarily a tool to my emotions. I'm able to be like, okay, I see this is happening sometimes, but very rarely do I get off, with the whole, I'm out of here. I've spoken in conferences and had people in the middle of the conference, raise an objection in sort of a shitty way of going, this is not even nice decorum. This is not how you talk to people. And you just sort of, okay, well, let me ask you a question. So I can usually do that pretty quickly in the moment. But that's pretty rare. I would say that the things that trigger me are less, I'm not in an environment where I'm being triggered. Everyone around me is people that I know pretty well. And if I read something or hear something, I'm more inclined to go see if I can communicate with that person. So I'm past the immediate response of being triggered. Writing is my preferred way because I can edit and be thoughtful and be like, oh, that's not the way I wanted to say that. Speaking is a little bit more difficult for me because I think faster than I speak, so my speaking is sort of broken up sometimes. So yeah, I think there's been a couple just in my own field of weird beefs with people, and I've been able to make friends out of everyone. And everyone's like, I can't believe that. They're just people. There are people having a bad day, or there are people who had a good point that I didn't understand, and I get very nervous doing it. I'm able to function. I feel the effects of adrenaline, but it doesn't affect my ability to take care of the situation. So my heart's pounding and I'm sweating, but I can still have a calm conversation about it. so I can regulate. Like I'm feeling it, but I have the control over my behavior, which comes in handy with parenting, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I'm prone to anger. Like if I had a dominant emotion that's problematic, it's anger, but that anger doesn't go out to other people. I just mostly beat up myself. Like I'm able to like hold it in that way. So it's not that I don't have like even strong feelings, but for some reason I just think about my dad. Like I always just use my dad as that example. Like he could just be in a crisis, plane falling out of the sky or whatever, but keep the calm voice and deal with the situation. I've never been in a real situation where it was. So then I'm always like, wow, this seems like a big reaction for an email, you know, or a big reaction for, you know what I mean? So like, I just go like, oh, and also these hormones are metabolized through movement, right? They're paired with some sort of action. But again, our adrenaline triggers are sedentary now.
Yeah.
You're just sitting there and watching the show come on and it's pissing you off. And your physical response is nothing. It's all in your mind. And so maybe I like taking action in that way. It's like I gotta finish the thread, and then definitely go for a walk when you're done. Right? You have to uptake those chemicals through physicality to metabolize them.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, this is Martin San, producer, editor, and sound designer for the 10,000 Heroes Joe. I just wanted to take a minute to thank our guest for joining us, and also thank you for listening. 10,000 Heroes is brought to you by Momentum Lab. This is the team. Pierre does our artwork, DJ Plainview composed our theme music, and I handle all the editing and sound design. Also, if you like the show, please follow it, rate it, tell all your friends about it, and of course, write to us. That really helps us make the impact we want to make. And now, we are closing down this episode with a word from our main sponsor, who also happens to be our host, Anchor.
And now a message from our sponsor, me again. 10,000 Heroes is brought to you by Momentum Lab. I normally refer to Momentum Lab as a coaching program or a goal accelerator, but it's really more like a master's degree in life. When you join Momentum Lab, we help you get crystal clear on what it is you actually want, who you want to be, what you want to do, and how you want to contribute. And then we get into all the painful details of what has been blocking you this whole time. And then we give you the knowledge, the tools, and the support you need to get there. Sometimes that's a spreadsheet, sometimes it's a mindset hack, sometimes it's a lecture, and sometimes it's a hug. Our only attachment is to your higher self. So, when you're ready to be the next version of yourself, in your business, for your family, or just for your own sense of fulfillment, drop me a line. Bye!